This is a to-the-point video. It is a condensed version of the full review. I will not answer questions in the comments section for this video. Please watch the full review if you want detailed information, and that video will be linked in the description section below. The iFi Hip Dac is a $150 device that surprisingly competes really well with alternatives below, at, and above its price. The Hip Dac is a flask-shaped amp DAC with a volume knob, balanced 4.4mm, single-ended 3.5mm, bass boost, and a gain switch on the top. The volume knob turns smoothly and is used to activate the device. The bottom of the Hip Dac has a USB-C port for charging only. There's a male USB-A connection for data. iFi includes cables for USB-C and USB-A connection. They do not provide a cable for Apple Lightning connection. The Hip Dac has what I would call a U-shaped sound signature. It's slightly warm sounding. In other words, the Hip Dac has a mid-bass boost and a slight treble accentuation. The bass emphasis sounds louder than the minor treble push. Sub-bass sounds close to neutral. There is about average melding between sub-bass and mid-bass, resulting in average clarity in that region. Vocals usually sound clear with some bass bleed into the mids. This bleed does not distort vocals or mid-centric instruments. On the contrary, this bass bleed adds a bit of support to the mids. Some might call this full-sounding mids. Guitars, drums, pianos, vocals, flutes, all mid-centric instruments sound natural and clear. They all have natural decay. This is the type of decay you might hear with your own ears at a live venue. The treble has marginally accentuated presence. Brass and horns tend to exhibit a bit more energy than on neutral sources. However, the treble never sounds harsh or piercing. Even at beyond safe volumes, the Hip Dac's treble is fairly smooth. The Hip Dac is not the clearest sounding amp DAC. This is where the slightly warm sound signature really makes itself known. More analytical sources will provide a bit more instrument separation and slightly faster decay. This might result in some details sounding marginally more obvious on those analytical sources. However, compared to neutral sources, the Hip Dac is ever so slightly less clear. The Hip Dac's bass boost adds a slight emphasis to mid-bass, and we're talking about the X-bass function. Sub-bass and mid-bass will meld together a bit more, and bass will bleed slightly into the mids. This does not make the bass sound bloated, nor does it drown out the mids. Instead, vocals might sound a bit more full, more bassy because of the X-bass function. I tested the Hip Dac against the ZenDac, Topping NX4, Earman TR amp, and Monolith THX Portable. The ZenDac and Hip Dac sound indistinguishable, especially if both devices are running the same firmware. The NX4 is more neutral, slightly clearer than the Hip Dac. The NX4 has less mid-bass emphasis and slightly less treble energy. Vocal sounds similar between these products, however. The TR amp and THX Portable are both analytical sounding amp DACs. They both have a slight bass roll-off and treble emphasis. The TR amp also seems to accentuate sibilance marginally. The Hip Dac has more mid-bass impact, a little less clarity, and overall smoother presentation. As for power output, the Hip Dac has the greatest power output of all the products I tested here. None of the alternatives are slouches, but if we are looking at numbers alone, then the Hip Dac clearly wins. In reality, all 5 devices I tested can easily power most dynamic driver headphones and will provide plenty of power for planar magnetic headphones as well. One caveat I want to point out is that the Hip Dac exhibits channel imbalance when initially turned on. If you have very sensitive IEMs, then this will pose a problem. By the time the Hip Dac balances channels, your sensitive IEMs might be far too loud. This issue is less problematic for normal impedance headphones. The Hip Dac ostensibly has 2 sound profiles. iFi provides 2 firmware updates. One is the stock firmware, whereas the other includes the GTO filter. According to iFi, the GTO filter will make the Hip Dac sound better. I tried both filters and could not really tell a difference. Overall, the Hip Dac is fantastic value. For about $150, you get good build, class-leading power, a sound signature that might be pleasing to many, balanced output, and MQA support. I wish iFi did not use the silly USB-A connection for data. This is the one major issue I have with this device. As a portable product, the USB-A implementation makes the connection process more bulky. Moreover, if you forget to take the USB cable with you, it is unlikely you will easily find a replacement at your local store. In totality, I think the Hip Dac is a serious contender in the portable amp DAC market. It has a sound signature different from its competitors and features that justify its $150 price tag.